So, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Agency CEO series. The whole point of this is to kind of get on the inside a little bit more of the agencies in and around the UK and Europe and in the US, and try and give you a bit more insight and kind of real world view of what it's actually like, being, a senior person or a founder or a CEO at, some of the most, kind of the most impressive businesses that we've got here in the space in the UK. So, it gives me great pleasure today to introduce Ryan Scott, the CEO of a much more scaled, actually, agency business called 26 that lots of you will have heard of today, part of an even bigger kind of PE-owned business called MMT Digital. I have lots of other exciting agencies as well. So be great to hear today what it's like, a bit further up the chain, and we'll obviously get some context around that. So thanks for joining, Ryan, and let's start with a bit of scene setting, I guess. And so do you want to kind of intro us and, give us a bit of
Yeah.
the elevator pitch of 26?
Yeah, of course. No, thanks for having me, Simon. So as Simon says, I'm CEO of 26, and I guess in old money, you would call us a integrated digital agency or full service digital agency. But I guess in today's world, we're just a digital agency, so we provide services right across the spectrum with clear specialisms within ourselves. And I think as an agency proposition, we always try to combine a kind of intelligence and imagination. We find they're probably the two key drivers for our business. So how we think, the data that underpins it, and the way that we look at the world, and then our imagination and the way that we look at problems and the way that we try to solve them for our clients. So we're really trying to create experiences that help our clients connect with the customers and really deliver those powerful results that we're trying to, I guess, accelerate their position in this digital first world, which is continually ever changing and continually difficult. But yeah, just going back to that kind of scene setting, if you was to split our services for a much more kind of lay view, I guess you'd have experience on one side, which covers anything from experience design, UX, etc. And right through to digital experience platforms or DXPs and the build and delivery of those. And then on this side, metaphorically speaking, you have the media side, which is around driving performance. So our proposition is built around combining those two elements. So how do we build things that are great experiences for customers, brands, etc., and then how do we create demand generation that's going to amplify and drive those businesses forward? And 26, as you right said, we're more of a scaled business. We've been around 18 years. I've been at 26 for 15 years in June, so quite a long time, and I've certainly seen the world change around me in that period. So yeah, hopefully that gives a little bit of scene setting, and obviously you can go on our website 26-agency.com if you want a little bit more detail on that.
No, perfect. No, that's a really nice way of rounding out. And I guess it'd be useful to talk numbers as well, as we like to do on here. So give people a sense of what that scale looks like. What's headcount look like, and kind of where are you in terms of kind of top line, bottom line revenue, and EBITDA. Or what can you share?
Yeah, of course. So we've just published. I was just talking about this. I've just published some figures that were from last year. We've got a bit of a funny financial year, but so last year our kind of headline turnover was 21 million. We just closed out this year at just under 30 million. That translates into, I guess, gross revenue or gross profit, whichever terminology you want to use, of around 13 million. And then at the bottom end of that, we always aim every year for a kind of OP and EBIT number of around 18 to 20%. So you can kind of do the maths generally off that we're kind of hitting around a £2.5 million EBIT on the back of that. And yeah, we those are probably two of the, well, EBIT in particular, being private equity, focused as we are, as you mentioned at the head of this conversation, is a real key measure for us. And yeah, so that's kind of roughly the scale. Headcount wise, we're about 130 permanent staff, and we scale up and down with freelancers and contractors, as many businesses of our type do. So at any one time, we probably have, I don't know, anything between kind of 140 to 135 in the business, depending on demand. And then if you to look at that as a split between what we class as direct and indirect, so direct to billable staff, indirect to support staff, although they're obviously much more than just support staff, we're probably like 90% billable and 10% indirect. So that's anything from HR, finance, ops, IT, etc. So fairly scaled headcount across Leeds, Manchester, and London is our three kind of primary hiring hubs, with a larger concentration in the north.
And how have you? I mean, that's great, and I think a lot of people listening, watching will find that really, really fascinating because they're not there yet, and so there'll be lots of questions, I'm sure, around the kind of the challenges of that. And in terms of where to start, I mean, I guess it'd be really helpful to get a kind of sense of what's in your head at the moment, and like what are the things kind of keeping you awake at night, given the fact that you are now so scaled. So what are the key challenges?
So yeah, great question. So I think that a colleague of mine always says revenue solves all problems. So there's always the balance of driving enough revenue to keep all those mouths full. So that's predominantly my core focus. So I think as a headline, kind of, if you look at our strategy year to year to year, we talk a bit, or I certainly talk about the map and the terrain. So the map is looking like we want to get to that endpoint or waypoint or whatever however you look at it. But the terrain along that journey is going to change quite significantly. So what you think might be, a 5 mile an hour headwind might quickly turn into a 20-mile headwind, and I've got to change. But very quickly. But I'm not changing my direction. I'm just adapting to the conditions. So revenue is, in that sense, is always the most predominant headwind, if you look at it that way, and it's either hot or it's not. And I guess that's a kind of curse of the agency world. So therefore, my focus is therefore on our sales and marketing strategy, and we've been through a big kind of rebrand and repositioning and mission, vision, values, and everything else, which was really predominantly trying to get ahead of the market and trying to put ourselves in a position where we're not quite part of the pack, but we're not miles ahead of it either and becoming too irrelevant and too strange, because that's not helpful. But we're giving ourselves that kind of room to grow, and that's very much sales and marketing driven. So that really keeps me up at night, particularly at the moment. And if you go back to that kind of terrain conversation, I don't think anybody can argue that the market's a little bit soft in that regard. And you had the COVID kind of lockdown on budgets, the release of that, and then the macroeconomics that have hit, that's starting to throttle spend and investment and everything else. So there's always that kind of like that nice tension between, we're doing okay. If you talk about those numbers I shared at the start, it's quite good, but also the next 3 months might make that picture look very, very different. And as you say, it can change as quickly as that. So that's probably always at the heart of my focus. And I also use the kind of thing in my head that that new business is the blood in the kind of the veins of the agency. It's the one that keeps it going and keeps things going. So you've always got to feed it. You've always got to feed new business, and we invest heavily in that regard. I think the second thing is operational efficiency and effectiveness, so efficacy, or whichever word you want to use. So I think agencies in particular, and we've been guilty of this in the past, and could do hours just on this topic, but I've been focused on scaling headcount as a sign of success. So it's like, oh, I've got 150, 200 people, we're brilliant. There's probably so much fat in there that in the reality is just for vanity, and is just because you feel that that's the right shape and size, and that's a kind of a masthead of success. The reality is that I've learned it's quite the opposite, in that actually a really great business and a great agency business is one that can actually scale exponentially without exponentially increasing your cost. And that's not about being tight and about cutting your way to success. That's about if the utilization of your staff, the way that you deploy that quickly and relevant to the clients and to the type of work you're doing, but also keeping enough space in the time for L&D, innovation, learning and development, all that type of like L&D, all the internal stuff. And that's probably been one that keeps me up at night the most, if I'm honest, because because I've been in the business for so long, I don't see people scale as a measure of success. Like, I just don't. It's just an output of what we're doing. It's just where we are. I really want to be able to deliver that business, which is really delivering great product, but also underneath being a really smart, sensible operational unit. So that's probably the two major things that keep me up at night. And then if I was to add a third one, I think people really in the business, keeping them happy, relevant, trained, future focused, on board, all those. I mean, there's so many variables in today's world and the hybrid living and working, should I say. It's just a really, real big challenge. I mean, that's probably the other two that I talked about are very kind of like unemotional. That makes sense. They're quite like input focused. Like if I do this and repeat it, scale it, then it's going to drive an outcome. The people side, that's I'm going to do it and I don't quite know what might happen. And that's quite hard when you're at scale because you're never going to please everybody all the time. And I think a lesson that I've learned is like take it less personal and try and just please as many people as possible because that's all you can really do. So they're probably the three biggest things is, so sales and revenue, how to deliver a really good operational business and look after the people and make sure that we keep on top of that because fundamentally they're the key to everything that we do as an agency.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely right, and I think that's really good advice. You're a people-based business, aren't you? And that only becomes more complex the more people you have. And I think it's often the biggest headache, but also the biggest reward of being an agency person, right? Is the fact that you are reliant on you're only as good as the people inside. And I think for those that are running a smaller or working in a smaller agency, I think the comments around operation efficiency are really interesting because the focus is always, particularly early, always on sales, revenue, because actually you're still operating a relatively simplistic business. So the kind of margin takes care of itself, doesn't it?
Whereas it does, absolutely does.
Now you're scaling, actually margin can be very quickly squeezed. And so then the focus flips back onto actually how can we run this thing and, how can we use technology in a better way and communication in a better way and all of those good things.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'm speaking from relative experience as well because, I came in on the, as I said earlier, the media side, and I was person zero, person one. So I've done the scale up, but I've also done the scale through. I don't know if that's the right terminology. And the two very, very different challenges, like massively different challenges. And it's almost like you're reinventing the business every 50 people. It's like you got to keep going, and they're like, okay, well, that needs a different thing, and now that needs a different thing. And like you say, the margin just is your cost and your operational cost just like expands, your margin decreases, and as we all know, people's the biggest cost, but also the biggest enabler. It's such a great tension, but you have to sacrifice sometimes, and that's a really difficult thing for us to do.
And it happens very quickly, as you said. The margin can be eroded quickly because you're so focused on sales and not, how do we deliver the work. And really good that you kind of seen that all the way through. And I guess that kind of almost it brings us nicely actually to the question around the changes that you've seen, everybody's seen obviously through COVID, and the enablement and move towards kind of remote and or hybrid working. How have you found that? What have you decided to do, and what have been the kind of opportunities and challenges within it?
I guess my headline, how I found it, is hard, really hard. I think as an agency leader, whilst it's easy to kind of dismiss it, but you have an element of being a bit of a control freak, and because you like seeing things, and it's like the environment used to be really fast, and you could sense if a business was on or off, like just by looking across the floor. It was that real in agency world. I think when people are up or down, or there's something bad coming or good coming or whatever, and you can react quite quickly to that. I think I found that really hard, and I think the business found it hard initially to move to that kind of virtual, independent, relying a lot on intercommunication that's like Teams messages and emails rather than the kind of the vocal element. So I think that was a real challenge, but I generally think it's not much of a challenge nowadays. I think we've successfully overcome that. I think from a cultural perspective, I think initially it was a galvanizing element, but then it became a a kind of a reductive element, if I'm honest. So it was like, oh, we're all in it together. This is a great thing. Look how quick we can change. Look at what we've done. Look at how remote we are. We can still do all these things. To then actually become something where people just drifted away from the centre, like a real drift. And then we survey people and we do all the right things from a people perspective. And there was this real kind of like hit back to us, which was like the culture's eroding, the juniors aren't getting trained. There's a lot of like henpecking because you're not there together, so messages are just sent over walls almost, and it's almost like just throwing these kind of context is totally lost. And I think that was a real challenge. And then I think last year when we went through the kind of the great resignation or whatever it was, I mean, that was just like, it was really tough because it was just like people like sand just going through your hands, and you didn't know why, because you can't see. So I think it's had its inherent challenges, and I think we've adapted, and we've at times put our head in the sand, if I'm honest, because you're just like, I don't want to rock the boat. I'm not quite sure, but we're coming back through that now, and I think through engagement, we do the best companies survey, and we were very fortunate, should I say, to be successful with our listing on that. That gave us a lot of feedback about what the future will look like for 26 and for the agency world. And I think for me, there's probably 2 or 3 key focal points that we're going to look at moving forward, which is training and development of juniors, because an agency will die without that. Because going back to my conversation before, if you think that you can just hire in at the top level and keep going and you're not, it just becomes over bloated. The cost comes too much, and you can't keep everyone happy, and it's just not a model. We have to have a platform for juniors to come through. I think secondly, with the new brand and the vision and the mission, etc., that we've done, and the values, we have to get people living that, and the way to get them living it is to be together. So there's going to be a bit more of a focus around that. And then thirdly, client outcomes, massively. I think the types of clients and the types of work we do that better together. So I think we've lost some of that spark and energy that we used to have in that regard. We're still good, clearly, but I think we want to elevate ourselves now and live into that propositional change and that kind of vision change that we're trying to do, and that's better together. We believe it is. So I think there's a kind of like a inverted U. Oh no, not like inverted U, an actual U. So it kind of gone down, and then kind of coming back up again. And I think that's probably a journey many people have gone on. We went an early adopter and say, no, everyone's coming back in the business because we think that was the right thing to do. But now, we're probably going to lean on much more of a, we want you here, we want you to be here at these points, but still within a flexible remit, because I don't think anybody wants to be told what to do on a minute of a day. It's not. I just don't think that's the right way to do it. But we do need more people together for sure.
Yeah, and how have you found that engaging with clients? Because obviously clients have gone through this process as well, haven't they? And so that dynamic has changed somewhat. And I think I'm always interested in what you're seeing on the ground from a kind of comms perspective, in terms of helping clients get the most out of you. And so perhaps the right way of framing the question is, if you were to give some clients advice now, given the changes that they've been through and you've been through, in terms of getting the best out of, kind of agency folk, what would your advice be for those in-house people?
I think it probably isn't too dissimilar to what it's those traditional values and key things that make our relationships great, which is, be there in the room is a really important thing at those key moments. And I think it's easy just to go, oh, we'll just have a virtual this month and we'll just have a Teams channel where we're all chatting. And it's great because you get that kind of direct access into Teams and vice versa. But like messages are lost and things like today I was, sharing a message with a colleague and I said, oh, I sent you it this morning. He went, and there was about 10 messages from the one that I'd sent to the one that, that when he's logged on and looked, so his attention isn't on that message, it's elsewhere, it's at the bottom of the chat. And I think that's, from a client perspective, is we all live in very ferocious, fast worlds, and time spent together, either virtually as in like we are now, or actually in a room, is invaluable. So find that time. I do think we need to stop looking at times as hours.
Yeah.
So I don't, because I think that's a bit of an antiquated way of looking at it. Like, let's get together, put an hour in. Is actually you can do it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with doing a 10-minute Teams meeting? Why do you have to do an hour? So I think there's probably a learning point there that we're trying to evolve and adapt with, is that stop looking at things in
Bigger
buckets of
challenge.
traditional
Yeah.
measures. Yeah, it's like, we'll have a meeting for 3 hours. We'll come to see you for 3 hours. It's like, well, actually, maybe we need to adapt and change into our ways of working with clients, which is, well, we can grab a coffee for 10 minutes. We can have a Teams catch up for 15. You know, are you in King's Cross? I'm in King's Cross. Let's just connect as we go through. I think those things for clients is see less of us as time drains and more flexible ways of working with us, and we will do it with you, and vice versa. I think that's one thing that I think is helpful, but I think it's certainly the way that we're trying to look at it. And then I think the second thing is that we always have this, you know, from my old boss Gail, she always used to say, is like, with clients, we want to be at the table with them, not serving them. Because once you become into that kind of servant master relationship, you become, you know, everybody can sense when you're in that relationship. Like, you can say, oh, we're partners with our clients, but you ultimately know if you're getting told what to do, and vice versa. And I think it's just breaking down that kind of silo that the agency is there and they're not working hard enough and they're not trying to deliver the great things for our business. I can absolutely guarantee, and not only in this business, but in any agency business across the UK, not a single team is sat there going, how do we not do this? That's not the way that we're cut. We're cut from a cloth, which is like, we're almost like cocker spaniels. We're just like, I want to please you. I want to please you. All I want to do is please you, and just stroke me and make me feel good. Like I know it sounds kind of trite, but that's kind of the way it is. It's a simple way of looking at the agency world, I guess. And again, we're better together doing that, which is why we put collaboration as one of our key values, because it is. And I was talking about this to everybody in the business the other week, which is like, it's our magic ingredient is collaboration, and clients have to open the door to allow us to collaborate. So that's not firing a brief and go and respond in 24 hours. That's, do you want to come and we'll talk about the brief? We'll talk about what we're really interested in 15 minutes, don't have to be an hour, and then we'll send you away, have a think, come back, and we'll brainstorm it together with your views, rather than this, here's a brief, we need that, no, it's not good enough, so I'm going to go look elsewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very binary, and it doesn't get the best out of anybody, at least of all the people who are trying to just please you and trying to want to do great stuff with you. So I think they're probably the two things, is like, reconstruct the way that we interact with each other in those moments, so it's not so blocky and so traditional. And then really, when we do interact, is really focus on getting the best out of each other, rather than handing off pieces of paper and expecting responses, because as I say, it's probably not the best way to do it. So
yeah, and I think, you know, you need to be able to prove that strategic value, and not just kind of, you know, as you say, you know, menu to order taking and delivery, and you have to be that, and that revolves around trust. And, you know, we always used to talk about the fact, you know, that's the relationship you need, and actually your client should never shout at you, because you know each other well enough.
Yeah.
You know, and you're sat at
the
table, rather than, you know, being served or serving. Fascinating thing. So look, now I think that's amazing, and, you know, I'm very aware of the fact that we could talk forever, but
of course,
time is running out. So what I'd like to do is, you know, just kind of ask you a few quick fire questions, if that's okay.
Of course, no problem.
Always interesting with the answers, short and sweet. So first one is, what are you the best in the world at?
Oh gosh, that is a good question. So I guess in the context of my work, I guess that's probably the best way to look at it is. And I think it's a key skill for any agency leader, and I do think I'm good at it. I'll give myself praises. I think I'm really good at operating in the grey zone, in the vagueness of what we do. I think it takes a certain type of character to be able to not have everything so absolute. And in agency world, it's difficult to sit and just be comfortable with either failure or success and be okay with that. And I think that's a key skill I've really developed. And I talk about it with my guys when they're being quite like really strident on something, and I'm going, actually, just be comfortable that it's not right or wrong, and that actually we could just be in this grey zone here, and it might work out, it might not, don't matter. is the next best action that we take. And that's not kind of being kind of like really virtue signaling and being like, oh, yeah, I'm really cool with it, because obviously at time to time I do kind of lean one way or the other. But I think I think I am really good at that, and I think that's what enables me to do my job and to help people around me not get too imbalanced, because I'll take that. It's all right. I'm all right in this little zone here. That's absolutely fine. I don't need to be right or wrong. So I think, maybe the best in this building, not necessarily the world, but certainly
That's good enough. That's good enough.
Yeah, it's good enough for me. It's good enough.
Yeah,
for me.
exactly. And then final question, and this kind of plays into that a little bit. If you're talking to other agency founders or other people, senior teams, or with the kind of the view one day that there will be, what are the top 3 attributes you'd say that would be really good to have as a kind of a senior agency person?
So to reflect on the point I just said, so being comfortable with things that are in the grey, that are not necessarily black or white, and reducing your emotional reaction to those. I think decisiveness is super important. And again, I would say I think I am quite decisive in that once I make my mind up, I'll go with that, and I'll take a lot of reflection from those people around me. But ultimately, as a leader, you've got to lead, and don't be afraid to make the decisions that you think are going to benefit the company. And then I think a skill that I think I've learned, well, there's the usual things, numeracy, people skills, but that I guess that's a given. Yeah. But the key thing that I've kind of learned is this, and I've done some learning on it over the last year, actually, with a great coach, who's around this theory of fast and slow thinking as well. So, like, the agency world naturally evokes a fast-thinking world. So you reacting, clients gone, right, what do I do to recover the revenue? Person's leaving, how do I salvage that team? This technology is becoming obsolete. How do I change that to make us in a different technology? And you constantly reacting to the world around you, and therefore, when it comes to business decision making, you then make fast-thinking decisions. Yeah, you don't change the gears. You become quite reactive to the world, and then your P&L, you look at it and go react. And I think one of the things that I've really kind of tried to focus on is that slow thinking when I need to use it. So when I'm looking at cost, for example, costs are lumpy. It's the nature of cost. But how do I look at the 2-3 year view and look at it as investment versus return over the long term? How do I look at it? How do I look at like people, teams, and stuff like that, and go, well, actually, what's fit for today isn't fit for tomorrow. So don't get wedded to one view. Take some time, think about it, ask other people's opinion. Look at kind of peer. And I'm lucky. I'm in a group, so I can lean upon 3, 4, 5 different CEOs and execs who can give me opinions. Don't be afraid to ask those opinions. Slow yourself down, and then make that decisive action. As I said before, be decisive, but do it with some really good slow thinking. I'm full hands up. In my early days of agency life, I was fast. Everything was fast. Business decisions, people, everything, fast. And I think sometimes you need to have those 2 gears that you just constantly flip in between, because if you don't, it's bloody stressful. And I think sometimes you need to take the heat off yourself and make sure you've got that longer view. And ultimately, as I say, have a plan. And I think that's the key thing is it enables you to move forward. So I know it sounds pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised.
Well, then it ties back, doesn't it, to the fast and slow thinking. To be strategic but also be reactive is important.
Yeah.
So look, right, I think we as I said, I think we could talk all day. It's fascinating because you've had so much experience through that that kind of timeline of growth, and I'd love to kind of revisit it perhaps later.
No problem.
And find out where you've gone. But for now, thank you very much for your time. And obviously, let's keep an eye on what your numbers do for the next year. And I'm sure you'll be sharing those. And let's hope that budgets are unlocked, as the kind of economy stabilizes a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been great. And I think I often do it. Like I've been here 15 years. When people ask me questions about it, you go, but yeah, I have done a lot. And I do know some things, but you don't. Yeah, no, it's always great to share. And as I say, we'll definitely stay close as we do, and hopefully, we'll see, some more great stories to tell in the near future, Simon.
Real. All right. Have a good rest of the week.
Will do. You too. Cheers.